Have you ever experienced that unsettling sensation, a vague discomfort that something isn't quite right, yet you can't precisely identify what? Perhaps you've found yourself performing favors against your better judgment, conceding in arguments despite knowing you were correct, or placing trust in individuals who later revealed their true colors. These experiences are far more universal than most realize, and they point to something profound. You are being subtly manipulated. Every day, invisible influences shape your decisions, opinions, and behaviors. This manipulation doesn't require hypnosis or dramatic mind control techniques. The most potent and dangerous form of manipulation is the kind that preserves the illusion of your autonomy, making you believe each decision was entirely your own, each misstep your sole responsibility. Millions live this way, unwittingly guided like pieces on an elaborate game board they never consented to play upon. When they attempt resistance, they're met with carefully cultivated feelings of guilt, fear, and self-doubt. They've been conditioned, over time, not to resist. If you believe yourself immune to these influences, pause and reconsider. This belief itself might be the manipulator's greatest triumph. True freedom begins with awareness, not with denial. Have you noticed those individuals who consistently achieve their desired outcomes without apparent effort? They rarely resort to shouting, threats, or pleading. Instead, they employ persuasion and engagement, masterfully creating the illusion that yielding to their wishes was your independent choice all along. This isn't mere charisma, it's a calculated technique, manipulation refined to its most effective essence. The skilled manipulator operates with strategic patience. They observe and study your patterns meticulously, your reactions, vulnerabilities, and emotional needs. They identify when you crave approval, when rejection frightens you, when saying no triggers guilt. And they leverage these insights with precision. The process begins before any words are exchanged. It starts with the silent reading of your nonverbal cues, your posture, your vocal intonation, your hesitations between sentences. Some manipulators deploy charm, offering smiles and compliments, presenting themselves as uniquely attuned to your needs. They make you feel recognized, understood, and special. Yet beneath this facade of kindness lies careful calculation. They're establishing an emotional debt that your instincts will compel you to repay. When someone appears extraordinarily considerate, your natural response is reciprocity, and this is the moment your defenses begin to crumble. Others prefer weaponizing guilt. They position themselves as victims, claiming to be overwhelmed, misunderstood, with you as their sole support. Gradually, they maneuver you into a position of emotional responsibility. Should you attempt to establish distance or boundaries, they need not engage in confrontation. A simple sigh, a cutting remark, or a look of disappointment suffices. The artful manipulator rarely makes explicit demands. They create conditions where you volunteer what they desire. Then there are those who employ fear as their instrument. They conjure worst-case scenarios. Without me, you'll face loneliness. If you leave, you'll never find someone comparable. They don't restrain you physically but imprison you ideologically. By undermining your confidence in your capability to act independently, they ensure you remain voluntarily confined. These strategies aren't modern innovations. Niccolo Machiavelli's The Prince clinically described how manipulation serves as a legitimate tool of power. He recognized before others that human beings are governed by interests and emotions, and those who grasp this reality can reshape perceptions. As he observed, men judge more by their eyes than by their hands because all can see but few can touch. Manipulation is precisely this, a visual and emotional performance staged to appear as reality. The manipulator creates an elaborate theater with you as an unwitting cast member. They assign roles, compose the script, and direct your performance. Most disturbingly, you believe the narrative is your own creation, yet this theatrical illusion functions only because something within you permits it, a gap, an emotional vulnerability, an unacknowledged desire. Until you recognize what makes you susceptible, you'll continue to be manipulated while mislabeling it as love, friendship, or respect. You are not manipulated because of inherent weakness, but because of your humanity. Within every person exists an emotional blind spot, an unresolved desire, an unhealed wound, a silent need that creates vulnerability. This is where manipulators gain entry. They don't force their way in. They listen and perceive what remains hidden even from yourself. Some carry an insatiable hunger for approval. From early childhood, they learned that affection must be earned through pleasing others. That love comes as a reward, not as an inherent right. Consequently, they shape their behavior to gain acceptance, validation, and recognition. This emptiness becomes an invitation to manipulators, who offer meager validation in exchange for blind loyalty. They provide the words you long to hear, and in return, you surrender your autonomy. Others bear guilt as a constant, invisible burden. They reproach themselves for establishing boundaries, prioritizing their needs, or declining requests. They were taught that self-consideration equals selfishness, that self-sacrifice represents virtue. Even when their instincts signal something amiss, they remain passive, believing themselves harsh, ungrateful, or cold. Manipulators recognize this guilt and position themselves as having only your best interests at heart. Through this distorted morality, they begin controlling your decisions. Many harbor profound fears, fear of rejection, isolation, or being forgotten. Such individuals cling to relationships, even toxic ones, dreading the prospect of emptiness. The manipulator provides a false sense of security, then threatens its withdrawal. They convince you that without them, you are incomplete, and you believe this because your fears had already whispered similar messages. These vulnerabilities have origins, they aren't spontaneous. They result from past experiences, unacknowledged traumas, inherited emotional conditioning. Until you confront these wounds, they remain exposed, and those approaching with smiles concealing ulterior motives know precisely where to apply pressure. Machiavelli understood this principle. He recognized that genuine control doesn't require force, only knowledge of human vulnerabilities. The nature of peoples is variable, he wrote, and it's easy to convince them of one thing, but difficult to keep them in that conviction. The manipulator doesn't merely convince, they occupy empty spaces. They establish themselves where awareness is lacking. Yet liberation is possible. You need not remain emotionally predictable. By identifying your vulnerabilities and addressing them, you can cease being an easy target and begin living with clarity. This path toward emotional armor, true immunity against manipulation, requires courage. Are you prepared to end your captivity? Most desire freedom from manipulation, yet few willingly pay the price for emotional liberation, in compromising self-awareness. Truth ultimately liberates, but initially, it wounds. The first illusion requiring dissolution is that goodness, empathy, and understanding provide protection. They don't. In fact, these virtues, when not balanced with discernment, make you especially vulnerable. Developing emotional immunity doesn't mean becoming callous, it means becoming conscious. It means interrupting the automatic responses to emotional triggers that manipulators exploit. The first step is recognizing your patterns. Pause and observe. What triggers compromise in you? Is it fear of disappointing others? Anxiety about rejection? The desire to maintain peace regardless of personal cost? Understanding your motivations begins to shift the power dynamic. The second step involves cultivating what Machiavelli might term strategic detachment. Learning to emotionally distance yourself from situations without sacrificing empathy. This means observing without immediate involvement, not accepting compliments as absolute truths, recognizing when someone is guiding you through emotion rather than reason, and pausing to consider before reacting. Manipulators rely on emotional urgency. They need you to feel rather than think. Your defense is thoughtful consideration. The third step requires becoming unpredictable. Manipulators operate through predictability, mapping your responses. They anticipate comfort when they display distress, lowered defenses when they offer praise, and capitulation when they apply pressure. Your defense lies in disrupting these expectations. Say no when yes is expected. Withdraw when persistence is anticipated. Remain silent when confrontation is predicted. This disarms their strategy and forces revelation of true intentions. Building a solid identity forms another crucial element. The more firmly you know yourself, the less need you feel to prove your worth, and the less power others hold over you. Manipulators thrive on controlling your self-perception, making you doubt and question yourself to align with their narrative. When your internal vision stands resolute, external control weakens significantly. Understand that this represents training, not instantaneous transformation. Emotional immunity develops through consistent self-observation, resisting the compulsion to please, maintaining decisions despite discomfort, and remembering that your only obligation is to your mental integrity. Preserving sanity in a world of emotional games constitutes an act of resistance. Machiavelli wrote that men must be pampered or destroyed, for if merely offended, they will take revenge. This harsh observation reveals an uncomfortable truth. In power dynamics, neutrality doesn't exist. Either you command the emotional landscape, or it commands you. But what approach should you take when the manipulator resides in your home, workplace, or relationship? How can you escape emotional control when the manipulator is someone you love? This represents perhaps the greatest test of your strength. Addressing manipulation becomes infinitely more complex when the manipulator isn't a stranger but someone you love, a parent, partner, boss who gave you opportunity, or lifelong friend. In these contexts, manipulation becomes more subtle, dangerous, and painful because it arrives disguised as affection, care, and loyalty. Out of fear of damaging the connection, you remain ensnared in an emotional web that depletes your energy, clarity, and identity. The intimate manipulator need not lie outright, they distort. They need not shout, they insinuate. They don't prevent choice, they cultivate guilt around choosing differently. Over time, you cease questioning. You begin walking on eggshells, avoiding conflict, anticipating reactions to preserve peace. Unconsciously, you become hostage to an invisible prison constructed from emotional bricks. In romantic relationships, this might appear as affection. I only act this way because I love you. Without you, my life has no meaning. Yet love demanding submission isn't love, it's emotional blackmail. In families, it disguises itself as tradition. You can't do this to your mother. You owe us respect. But respect extracted through guilt isn't respect, it's control. In professional settings, it presents as loyalty. You should be grateful. Who else would give you such an opportunity? But gratitude weaponized as dead is pure manipulation. The central truth remains. Proximity doesn't justify emotional violation. Love doesn't confer the right to shape another through fear or guilt. To break this cycle, you must first accept an uncomfortable reality. Not every relationship containing affection is healthy. Not everyone who loves you knows how to love without conditions. Not every bond that holds you offers protection. Some simply prevent growth. Begin by establishing boundaries, clear, firm boundaries requiring no justification. A calmly delivered no carries more power than endless explanations. Next comes transparency. Articulate what you observe, feel, and will no longer accept. This isn't to convince the other person but to assert yourself to yourself. Finally, remain steadfast when inevitable reactions follow: insults, victimhood, punitive silence. The manipulator feeds on hesitation, testing limits with the expectation of retreat. Here lies a reality few dare confront. Sometimes loving someone means stepping away, exiting the dysfunctional pattern and allowing the other to face their emptiness. While you remain trying to rescue, support, or explain, change becomes impossible, and your identity dissolves. This decision, though difficult, becomes necessary. Only those liberated from toxic bonds can develop new perception, seeing beyond words, beyond masks, beyond surface intentions. With this enhanced vision, we enter the next phase, applying Machiavellian strategic thinking in contemporary life to maintain mental protection in a world where everything and everyone attempts to influence you. The time has come to reverse the dynamic. Machiavelli never wrote to appease. He showed no concern for appearing ethical, virtuous, or well-intentioned. His commitment was to raw, unfiltered reality, the kind most prefer to ignore. Surviving psychologically in today's world requires thinking with his brutal clarity, cold strategy, and emotional detachment. We exist in an era of perpetual manipulation. Social media, marketing, politics, relationships, all operate through influence, image, and narrative. Those failing to recognize this become engulfed by it. Machiavelli viewed humans as predictable, driven by interests and emotions, asserting that understanding these mechanisms confers power. Men generally judge more by their eyes than by their hands, he noted. Everyone can see, but few can touch. In other words, perception outweighs truth in influence. Today's game follows this principle. Control the narrative, control decisions. Control the image, control influence. Understand psychological mechanisms, control behavior without raising your voice. Practically, this means ceasing to live on emotional autopilot. Machiavelli rejected universal morality in favor of context. What serves one situation may create vulnerability in another. Noble theoretical principles may constitute strategic suicide in reality. Kindness without discernment becomes foolishness. Honesty without appropriate timing becomes self-sabotage. Unlimited altruism becomes servitude. Freedom requires learning to play the game, and play it effectively. Begin with observation. Learn to read people as Machiavelli read nobility, not by declarations but by actions when unobserved. Evaluate behaviors rather than promises. Analyze patterns rather than excuses. Trust less in words and more in the concealed interests motivating them. Above all, don't merely react, anticipate. The manipulator acts strategically. Your defense lies in remaining consistently one step ahead. Then employ silence as a weapon. A common mistake is excessive emotional exposure, showing too much, explaining too much, revealing too much. The Machiavellian understands that silence confuses, commands respect, and disrupts the manipulator's rhythm. When you respond unexpectedly, the script loses coherence. In that disruption, you gain control. Another essential application is mastering strategic ambiguity. Machiavelli taught that maintaining power requires appearing virtuous without necessarily embodying virtue. In modern contexts, this means adapting your language, posture, and presence according to environment without compromising your essence. Complete self-revelation isn't necessary. Show enough to control perception while preserving your core self. Most importantly, take responsibility for your emotional state. Manipulators feed on instability, requiring you to doubt, fear, and hesitate. When you know yourself, regulate yourself, and remain steadfast under pressure, you become impenetrable. Machiavelli advised, the prudent man should follow paths beaten by the great and imitate those who have been excellent so that even if he does not reach their level, he may come close. In essence, use the wisdom of those who mastered the game to cease being merely a pawn within it.